Hello! How's it going out there, everybody? Good to see you. Good to be seen. Feeling a little less under the whatever I was last week. I hope my mood is infectious, and I hope that it stays with us for the next 3 hours. So good to see everybody here. The usual suspects. It's good to see everyone. Let's get straight to the questions, shall we? Maybe we'll stay current and not get too far behind. T.R. Gregg. Hey, T.R. Gregg. Recently purchased 65 Pro Reverb, taken to a well-known amp tech to sort out noise and a weak ticking tremolo. Can I suggest the proper ceramic caps for this? Well, TR, that puts me in a tough spot. You already brought your amp to a well-known tech. And so if you come to him and say, hey, this guy on the internet says how to do your job, he or she may or may not respond well to that. So that's point A. I don't want to be that guy. And point B is they probably already know exactly what parts to use should those caps need to be changed out. So all that said, I like the Murata 500 volt and 1 kilovolt MLCs for that task. But I don't want to be in the position of telling techs, well-known or not, how to do their job. I hope you understand that. But so that's the answer. But there's also, take those caveats pretty seriously. Keep all your bridges healthy. Sasha, some ZZ Top. Fuck off, YouTube. We're not gonna give him ads right now. Let's all talk like this today. They got a lot of nice ads, let me tell you. Let's see. Mileka de Tubes. Hey, Buckingham Band. Thank you. Hey, Das Vega. Attempting my mods on a Night Train 15 head. Any advice, tips, etc.? I don't remember all that stuff that well. It's been a long time since I worked on a Night Train. I remember that the main thing I was doing was making it not be a bright, fizzy nightmare in the higher gain stuff, because it was really aggressive. But I don't recall. I'm sorry. I've worked on an awful lot of amps over the years, and I don't mean that to sound like I'm being self-important. Some of them I remember, some of them I don't. I was on some forums at the time, and the Night Train was a relatively new amp that I was seeing a lot, and it just sounded so horrible. I'm like, well, why does it sound horrible? Oh, they did this. That was dumb. If you do this, it's going to sound better, and I share that with people. So everybody's saying hello to me and to each other. Very good. Dan D took my advice and sold the Marshall Origin 50. That's good, man. There's so many better amps out there that do the Marshall sound better than anything Marshall's made since, easily the 90s, which is sad. I don't want to say that. I want them to be great. I like it when great companies stay great. We should still view Marshall, Fender, and Vox as like the Trinity, and they've had their good and bad eras, but Marshall's having a particularly bad era right now. Hey, J. Dave. 5F2A. Last week's video, I talked about cabinet size and speaker size and how they need to pair well together. And you can put the world's best sounding speaker, in theory, in too small a cab and not get a good sound. So the Motortone 5F2A, I believe that cabinet is the traditional dimensions designed for an 8-inch speaker. And while I'm not a huge fan of 8-inch speakers, a 10-inch speaker probably won't sound that good in the cab built to the dimensions for an 8-inch speaker. It's possible, but you're fighting some physics there. So what I would suggest is that you build the 5F2A with the 8-inch speaker. And of the 8-inch speakers out there, I would look at Weber and MOD and Warehouse, all of which have some pretty good offerings. Not that you can expect too much from any 8-inch speaker. But then maybe get a matching 1x12 or 1x10 or 2x10 tweed covered cab from Mojitone, and put some larger speakers in that larger cab. And instead of having the internal speaker hardwired to your 5F2A, sorry, so many numbers and letters, use a 1/4-inch plug so you could run into the external cab instead. So you'd have the little bitty champ or whatever with the 8-inch speaker as a standalone, but then you could plug it into the bigger cab and have the full sound coming out of the circuit when you don't feel like being a slave to tradition. Hope that makes sense. I think you'd be happier that way. Started slowly upgrading caps and resistors. My 74 twin reverb. Lots, if not most, wires are fairly stiff. Some have oozed green with heat applied. Time to change the wires. Yeah, 74. There are two kinds of wire you're going to run into in that amp. The general spaghetti wire, which is plastic coated, stranded, and those can oxidize or react to something, and it kind of gets that green funk that goes up the wire under the insulation that can lead to not great connections. And then you'll have some kind of crappy, kind of sticky shielded wire in that area. I would replace all of it if possible. Certainly replace the most critical. Of the stuff on the market that looks the most like what you already have, as far as the regular CBS spaghetti wire, Valve Storm sells what's called a top-coated wire, primarily for Marshall use, but it is really nice, fairly high temperature jacket. It's not Teflon, but it still handles high temperature well, with a very nice top-coated stranded wire inside that behaves like a solid wire. Or if you want something that would not look vintage correct, but would be also a great wire, Tube Depot sells some Teflon PTFE coated wires. I would use their 20 gauge stranded. The 10, you don't have to pay for the silver stranded version. Costs more, doesn't give you any benefit. But that also would look similar to what was in there, but you can dress the leads so nicely with that 20 gauge stuff. It can be shaped a little bit, kind of like a solid core wire, but it's still stranded and has all the benefits of flexibility that offers. If I have a 70s Fender amp where I need to replace the wire, I don't usually change it out to the cloth covered pushback solid core stuff, which is not particularly fantastic wire. But if I'm doing a 50s or 60s Fender, I will use the cloth covered pushback stuff because it's pretty, it's appropriate, and when it's working, which it usually does fine, it does the job very well. It's actually better stuff than what Fender was using in the 70s, because that stuff just oozes funk. And not in a cool way. Not in a... That's me being cool and funky. I'll stop now. I can't live up to my own t-shirt. At least not cold. Hey, Jim Holloway, working on an EF86 AC4 clone, sans trem. Would like to brighten the voicing. Pots are 1 meg. Coupling cap is 0.047. Cap on cut control is 0.001. Any suggestions greatly appreciated. Yeah, leave the pots the way they are. Decrease the coupling cap from 47 nanofarad to maybe really 4.7 nanofarad would do you. 10 nanofarad would be a healthy amount of low end. And then put a bright cap on it. Try a 68 picofarad through a 220 picofarad, 100 picofarad, 150 picofarad, whatever, 110, 220, whatever it takes, and see if you like that. That'd be a good way to do it. You're going to have a little less flub by putting a saner amount of high pass point with a decrease of the coupling cap, and then just give it a little bit of air by adding a little bright cap. You may even like something smaller than a 68 picofarad, but it's up to you. Did I say picofarad before? I've said picofarad for decades, and since getting the channel, I've been forced to try to retrain myself to say picofarad because it is correct, but it is an unpleasant, tinny sounding word. Pico, pico, pico. Hey, Scott, thank you very much, man. I do try to be clean, at least in my work, if not in my thoughts and deeds. The things you can do with a casino. I love mine. Yeah. This is a really, really nice guitar now, but it certainly wasn't as purchased. If you see the videos on this, I mean, it has good tuners. Those are the factory tuners. The body, the wood, the neck is good. The frets are good. This. And all the stuff inside have all been upgraded because they were not very good. But, I guess if I were paying full price, I would have about $1,400 in this, $1,500 in this. As it is, I've got about $700 in this. And I really enjoy playing it. Plus, it looks the tits. Thank you, Tony Leach. Appreciate that. The videos will resume soon. I've been doing a lot of work this week and haven't had time to make videos because of things happening. I've missed the editing process. But sometimes I know that I've just got a little too much on my plate to share with everyone. Not every amp that I work on makes the channel, even when I am pumping the videos out fairly regularly. It takes a lot of work to do this stuff. I did a video showing how I make the videos that I think about 17 people watched. And I thought about doing another one because that was about a year ago, and I've changed my process a little bit, gotten a little bit better at certain things. Maybe 18 people would watch that one. Should I do it? Should I do another video? Hey, Colby Jack. Hey, Steph. Oh man, I don't have my work can approach magnificent sometimes. I don't think I've ever approached enlightenment. My wife does yoga. She's much closer to that than I am, but I appreciate your kind thoughts. And I appreciate everyone joining in from all around the world. Yeah, Victor bought some bare knuckle pickups that I had purchased to put in that 335 because when I first got the 335, I thought, well, this sounds really good, but it's a little bit mid-rangey for my tastes. And so I ordered some low wind bare knuckles to try the bare knuckles Stormy Mondays. And I'm sure they're fantastic, but by the time I got around to having time to install them, I had kind of gotten used to and quite come to enjoy the sound of the pickups, the Memphis historic spec in that guitar. And doing some subsequent research, I found that people were saving up and trying to buy the Memphis historic spec pickups, and that they were very desirable to a lot of people. So I think it was a matter of acclimating my mind to what they actually sounded like versus what I had previously idealized my 335 as sounding like. So, we shift. And Victor's been a long-time supporter of the channel and never misses a stream, always there in the comments, always friendly with an aloha and a mahalo. So I was glad to give him a kind of a sweetheart friend deal on those pickups, knowing that they would go to a good home in a tropical sunny clime. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, these are photos I've been taking around my neighborhood for the past month or so. I've got about 300 on there. And the frustrating thing is when they went to iOS 18, you could no longer change the speed of the slideshow. And this is actually iOS 26 on this. But yeah, I got to find a way to slow it down because it's... But every day, except when it was a couple days when it was just incredibly hot a few weeks back, and a few days when it's been incredibly raining, though I did go out in the rain as well. I do about 2 to 4 mile walk every afternoon as the light is good, and just take photos of various things happening in neighborhoods. There's my wife in her pretty pose. Mostly in my neighborhoods. Some of the stuff there was a festival, a street festival we had about 3 weeks ago, I guess. And, some little things with friends and stuff. But just walking around 2 to 4 hours, trying to see my everyday environment afresh. It's been really interesting to walk down the streets that I've walked for decades and seeing everything that I've seen a million times through different eyes from a different perspective. It really teaches you to appreciate and to see afresh. It's like I don't know. It's like if you pick up an album that you haven't listened to in 15 years, but you listened to that album all the time back in the day. You thought you knew that album, but that was the 15 years ago you version who was listening to that album. And everything you've learned about music in the intervening 15 years, when you hear the album again, you hear different things. I mean, you may think, well, man, this is just some lame shit. I don't know why I liked this 15 years ago. Or you may say, I really never appreciated the subtlety of the chord voicings before, or why this works, or, what a great singer she is, or whatever it is. So, I think in anything, the more you know and the more you pay attention, the more there is to benefit you, to grow from and to enjoy. And I'll stop being all philosophical and shit. Well, I can't promise that. I'm prone to that. It is one of my few flaws. Hey, Joachim Juncker, thank you very much. It is a cool shirt. It's a cool museum, the Stax Museum of American Soul Music here in Memphis. And I just spoke to the director 2 days ago, and I got permission to do a video. So I'm going to go do a tour of Stax for you guys, and I'm going to try to also do a tour either in the same video or film it in the same day or two of Royal Studios, which is around the corner from Stax, where all the Al Green stuff was done. I had wanted to do, earlier in the summer, I was trying to do live streams as I drove around town. But A, Verizon was just fucking me. B, it got too hot to do it. It was just too hot. C, if I got to someplace interesting doing a live stream with my phone, I couldn't go in and show you guys anything, because as soon as you go in the concrete, the phone would lose the connection. So I've decided to do some videos for the channel, Memphis for musicians, basically. And, there's a lot of awesome stuff here, well beyond Graceland. If you come here, you'd have a much more interesting time than if you're just doing the stuff that all the YouTube videos tell you about. Hey, 3 days a week in Memphis, what do you do? And they hit every tourist trap. I see these things because Nikki and I watch tourism videos about other cities, destinations around the world, whether we're planning a trip or whether we're just interested. And out of curiosity, we've put on some about cities we know well. Like we've put on some about New Orleans, we've put on St. Louis, Nashville, Memphis. And most of those are just dire. It's just like someone went to Travelocity or whatever it is and did the top 10 things to do and said, all right, that's what we'll do for the video. So it's just, they're all amplifying, repeating the most cliched, surface level, boring shit to do. So I want to fight that. Is the internet going to convince me to have a casino at some point in my life? Well, Trump had 4 and didn't work out so well for him, so... Question for today: how do I evaluate a 22 microfarad 10 volt electrolytic tantalum pearl with an ESR. I wouldn't evaluate it. I'd toss it. It gets complicated. It sits in the PCB of the Bosch control unit in my 35-year-old Volkswagen. Well, I would be very surprised if any tantalum cap has lasted that long. I would hope that it is a part where you could change it without having to reprogram a computer or anything. If you've got a 35-year-old VW, you'd probably be okay. But if I don't worry about ESR, you can have a cap that passes the ESR tests and all these low voltage tests just fine. That's a bad cap. It's just electrolytics don't tend to last. So, but I am not a car mechanic. So, hey, Todvidus, thank you for joining us. Sorry, it's not that your name is strange. It's that it is an unusual combination of letters for my eyes, and it's very small on my screen. Best type of post-phase inverter master volume for Marshall 1987. I like the Larmar. I installed the exact same Larmar in that 74 Super Bass 2 weeks ago. So look for the most recent Super Bass videos and you'll see me install that. And I've done videos specifically on that master volume. I like the Larmar. Named Larmar is a weird name. It's named after two guys who used to be on, or may still be on a Marshall forum, but they both came up with the basic idea. Basically, you're replacing the two 220K grid leaks and the output of the phase inverter with dual sections of a 250 microfarad, sorry, not 250 microfarad, 250K dual gang pot. And it works very, very well. And when it's on 10, it's out of the circuit. It is a Lithuanian name. Okay, well, I hope I came close to pronouncing it correctly. I never want to mispronounce names or be disrespectful to any other culture. But when I'm seeing these things in small lettering over about 1.5 meters in front of me, my eyes swim. I can see Rob and Richard and Victor and Andy and Mark pretty easily. And then I get to an unusual combination like Buckingham Bard. Then I'm like, what does that say? Okay. It's reading what you're actually seeing versus expecting what to see. So what you see. So sometimes you guess and you just swing for the fences. Do I think a Blues Junior would sound better with a 10-inch speaker? I will pass up on all the snark which comes to mind and say that probably not. And I certainly would not change the cabinet or modify the cabinet to accept a 10-inch speaker. But the Blues Junior is a good example of a 12-inch speaker being in a cabinet which is just barely big enough for it, and it does create a somewhat boxy mid-range focused sound in most Blues Juniors, particularly with the stock speaker. But there are speakers you can put in there which are a little bit scooped, which make it breathe a little more nicely in that cabinet. Or you can also get good results sometimes doubling down on the mid-range and going with like a greenback. Speaker choice is not a science. It is definitely personal preference with a lot of room for art or fuck you, I like it. So, if you like it, it's the right one for you. Let's see, what is the smallest cap values I've installed and like the result in the V1 cathode bypass cap, Fender or Marshall? Hey, Dandy. Well, I will often, if it's not a vintage example, decrease the cathode bypass cap on the first stage of a Fender from 22 or 25 microfarad down to, 4.7 on a non-shared cathode. That's still full frequency. And unless you're having any issues with hum from the heater supply, in which case sometimes you need to do a full bypass down to like 6 hertz. Usually a 4.7 is a good choice there. For Marshall, I've gone as small as 47 nanofarad if I really want to exaggerate something, but usually 680 or 100 nanofarad does the job. And you can also do 470, which is kind of in between them. Basically, I want to make sure I'm not getting any issue from an unbypassed cap in the frequency range where the hum might be from the heaters. And I want to make sure, if I can, that I'm not going to flub out the next gain stage, some of which depends on how much gain is happening and which qualities where. If you're a very clean circuit, you can have a lot more low end, but if you're getting say a 2204 or later level of gain, you may want to say, hey, those ultra lows are not my friend. This is why a lot of people like to go from a 22 nanofarad to a 2.2 nanofarad coupling cap on a 2204, just to shave off a lot of the flub stuff. Hey, Count Domingo, just picked up that 65 twin blonde reissue. And notice the jewel light is dimming off and on. I can change it, but could this be a sign of bad things? It's probably not a sign of a bad thing. It's probably a sign either that you have an intermittent light, it's just a number 47 light bulb, or the light bulb is not screwed in all the way. The bayonet contact may be all the way tight, or it could be that you've got a dirty contact, or that the wire, there are two little tabs on a jewel base for the light, and they rotate like this. And sometimes when they rotate, they don't make good contact with electrical contacts that connect to the bulb. And just going in with a wooden or plastic utensil like a chopstick and just rotating them a little bit, all of a sudden it becomes steady. But you're probably, worst comes to worst, opening it up and moving the things a little bit, making sure they have good contact away from a working light, or you are $1 bulb away from a steady light. If the heater supply is not fluctuating as far as the tubes go, it's probably just a light bulb issue. I understand why you ask, but it's probably nothing to worry about. Just made some sausage, egg, and hatch chili breakfast quesadillas. Why do you call them breakfast quesadillas? Those quesadillas would be good anytime, Wes. I hope you made enough for the rest of the class. Hey, Goody Guitars. Do I check resistors in circuit? Which resistors do I find go bad the most? Thanks. I do check resistors in circuit. I check them all the time. I have even had people criticize me in my videos for saying, "Hey, he's measuring resistors in circuit. You can't measure resistors in circuit." Yeah, you can fucking measure resistors in circuit if the amp's off. 100K plate's going to measure about 100K. The only place where it gets complicated are things like mixed resistors, where things are in parallel, and you know that, hey, this 470K on the mixed return stage is probably going to measure like 147K because it's in parallel with a 220K to ground. It depends a little bit on the reverb putts rotation, and the 220K to ground is going to measure like 147K, and the mixed resistors on the output before the phase inverter of a Fender. Sometimes you get a slight variation there, and the 47 or 100 ohm resistor to ground from the tail of the phase inverter, that's in parallel with your speakers. So you're not going to get an accurate reading on that, but most of the other resistors in the amp you can measure as long as the amp is off. As to which I find go bad the most, the sources of noise are usually plate resistors and mixed resistors. They are the most critical because they tend to be the largest value resistors, and with any resistor, the more resistance it offers, the more likely to cause noise it is. And in the case of the plate resistors, the most voltage is across them, so the more likely it is that they might be stressed. Now, that's talking about stuff on the board, as Ted Mitch just says, screen grid resistors. Yeah, especially in old Fenders, I should almost always have to replace the screen grid resistors because they use a 1 watt carbon comp, which is just a terrible choice for that. I replace with a 2 or 3 watt resistor. Usually I use a 3 watt Vichy wire wound, but in a Deluxe Reverb yesterday, I replaced them with a 2 watt metal film, which is still infinitely better than what they came with. That's the most common one is the screen grid resistor. And the dropping resistors in the doghouse on old Fenders like to drift as they absorb moisture. That's just the nature of carbon comps. But yeah, I measure all the time in circuit. I'm not going to desolder. I'm not going to desolder a resistor to measure it. This is the casino. Thanks, Cat's Music Journey. Yeah, I'm a Beatles fan from way back. So the trick is I gotta hit back by the bridge to get those sounds. I love the thing. Paco de Guillo. You're right, Wes. Matthew, thank you for getting that. Matthew is a good woody name. Let's see. I just want to take this opportunity to say, Mark Cohen, we almost forgive you, but we hate that song. Oh my God, what an awful song to be associated with. And if you ever find yourself here and you've been unwittingly have been a fan of that song, do not try to follow the ghost of Elvis from Union Avenue all the way to Graceland, because it's about 15 miles through some of the worst neighborhoods you would not survive, and we have cars too, but it is a horrible song, and it is unavoidable. Yeah, Josh, I got her a little Lumix LX7, which was a kick-ass Digicam in 2012, and it still takes fantastic photos with a lot of character. And so much better controls than an iPhone. You can actually have depth of field. Aperture, what a concept. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'd love to give you a good studio tour, Dustin. Maybe we'll do Sun at some point as well. Pardon me. I heard that wiring the heaters of the power tubes reduces hum. Well, the best way to reduce hum is to not wire the power tubes to the heaters. That way you have no sound coming out of the speaker. It'll be a dead quiet amp. I'm not sure what you're actually asking there. The power tube heaters need to be connected, and there are ways to wire them. Most of the tricky ways to wire heaters are in the preamp section. By the time you get to the long tail pair, phase inverter, and push-pull pairs of output tubes, it's basically like a humbucking condition. You can just have straight wires for the heaters. You don't have to twist them or dress them any particular way. The grids are almost immune to it. But I'm not sure if there's some other question you had there. So if you want to revisit that, Erwin, I'd like to answer any questions you have. Hey, Chris Bolin. Greg built him a Germino JTM45 combo. It's a monster. Well, I'm glad I was able to put you in touch. I met a guy last night in town just for a high school reunion. Staying with an old friend of mine, as a matter of fact. I met him down at a restaurant down the street from here, and he watches the channel. He's in Nashville. And based on my recommendation, he and one or two of his buddies all got Friedmans, and they're thrilled. So I'm always glad to introduce people to the correct amp, even if it's not one I make. And Van Shank Guitars, it's your birthday, man. Happy birthday. Almost starting on the wrong string. Threw my left hand memory off. I won't do any more of the 16 Candles bit for you. Was Chess Records Memphis? No, Chess Records was in Chicago. Sun Records and Royal Studios High Records and Stax were here in Memphis. But there were a lot of, and Sun Studios, there were a lot of cross-pollination, especially between Sun and Chess back in the day. I'd love to do a tour of Chess Records for you, but it'd be a long drive. Hey, Mark, just playing with the grounding scheme on the 61 AC15. Where do I recommend the grounding the double 8 cap on the EF86 preamp? Getting an earth loop when I jumper the two channels together. Oh, let's see. I would ground it as close to the input as possible, while making sure that nothing else. Basically, you don't want to have more than one path to chassis connected at the same time. So start by grounding it where Vox grounded it, which I believe would be to the chassis right there for most of the caps. And if your other wires are going, or other grounds are being made to a bus wire run to the back of the pots, you could run a ground from those dual caps to that bus bar instead of the chassis. But I'd really need to have your amp in front of me, or photos of your amp. So I'll get to your second comment in just a second, because I definitely agree with you. Shoot me an email with some photos of your amp, and I'll be glad to consult with you on this. Or shoot me if you've got like WhatsApp or something, so we could talk on the phone or whatever, or FaceTime or whatever, without paying long distance. I'd be glad to do a consult. I appreciate you being here, and all the 61 AC15s of the world need to be protected as much as possible, as do other things. London is possibly my favorite city I've ever been to, including some real humdingers like New York and Chicago and Vienna and Paris. And, I love London. I don't know what great leader you're referring to, because we seem to have none at the moment. But what an asinine UN speech. It's, idiocracy got nothing on this thing. It's just so depressing to contemplate. So I'm not going to contemplate it right now, right here. We're just going to move on and know that I see you and I hear you. And I'd be glad to give you a consult on that AC15. Hey, Colin, I have a Dream 65, and I'm looking at two DI options, the Walrus Audio Canvas Mono or the Highland Mono. Okay, well, do you need a DI with a Dream 65? I guess you would, just to do a longer run. I don't know anything about Walrus Audio Mono or Highline Mono. I know about DIs. I'm old school. I'd be like, well, let's see. I would probably. I am not sure what all is on the market, and my DI concepts are the same ones that everyone's been using for 30 years. Might be some better ones out there. I don't know about any of the brands you just mentioned, so I'm clearly not up on this. But what do you need from it? Do you need a whole bunch of switching options, or just a good transformer, just to convert from line to mic level? Because there are a lot of good passive DIs out there with Jensen's that'll do that for you. But Brad probably knows more about current DIs than I do, because he sells PA and installs PA stuff. Hey, J.E., what Memphis instrument exchanges or pawn shops in the area would I say are worth a visit? Man, I've never found anything good in any of the pawn shops in Memphis. They've been so picked over back in the day, and even when they had good stuff, they knew the value of it, and they were selling it in other places, not through the pawn shop. You can go get a $200 guitar for $300 at most of the pawn shops around here. But if they get anything good, they check it on eBay or they list it on Reverb. So, yeah, here's the thing. You're in Middle Tennessee and you don't know if Chess was in Memphis. Man, we got to do something about the musical education in this country. And it starts with John Sebastian and the Love and Spoonful with his song Nashville Cats, where he talked about those Yellow Sun records from Nashville. Ain't no Yellow Sun records from Nashville, John. Those are from Memphis. Sun Studios was Memphis. Nashville back in the day didn't know about rock and roll at all. Chess was in Chicago. All the rock and roll stuff was here in Memphis. Birthplace of. Sorry, Cleveland. Yeah, Dustin. Pre-phase inverter, post-phase inverter. It drives me crazy. PPMV. But they'd both be PPIMV if you know. It should be Pripamove and Popamove or something. I probably just popped the mic. Hey, Van Shank Guitars, thank you very much. Thanks for the videos on the Hot Rod series. It helped me greatly in repairing mine that was close to burning a hole through the tube board. Had to rebuild the circuit traces. Well, I was glad I was able to help you, and welcome to the world I used to live in. I don't work on them anymore, but I sure used to. I think they paid my car note. Every month there'd be 3 or 4 Hot Rods or Blues Deluxes or DeVilles or whatever that would come in. Always with the toasted boards, because Fender just didn't give a fuck about their owners, their customers, and they still don't. But the damn things do sound good when they're not on fire. So I'm glad you're able to keep it from catching on fire. It's frustrating. Yeah, Cadillac Records is a cool movie set in Chicago. I'm not giving you shit, Sean, but if you live in Tennessee, you need to know these things, man. What is my opinion on first era Marshall 1987-1959 reissues during 1990? No FX loop ones. I would consider them about the same as the new ones. The early 90s ones were good, but the power transformers from that era have tended to become noisy over time. The ones now have different transformers, and I've had some relatively new ones with bad transformers. So I don't know if either are better or worse as far as the transformer quality. When the transformers are not acting up, when there is no problem with the transformers, the amps sound quite good. The main issue with 87-59 reissues from 1990s to now is that they have a little blue box on the board, which is a trimmer for the heater balance circuit. And the current present in that circuit is too great for the current capabilities of that little blue trim pot. And it burns, and it often cascades and causes other problems when you have a heater short like that. And the fix for that is very simple. You just bypass that little trim pot and replace the existing resistors with 200 ohm resistors. And the turrets are already on the board to do that very easily. It's literally a 5-minute fix. I've shown that in some videos. Brad here at Brad's Guitar Garage has that same fix in some of his videos. Brad, can you find your video on that and pop a link down here for Mr. Povolonis here? Because seeing is so much easier than hearing the words, and it makes so much sense. That is the Achilles heel of the 8759 reissues. It's easily remedied. It's a good sounding amp otherwise, and if the transformer goes out, you can upgrade to a Haybor for about $100-200. So, grand scheme of things, pretty safe bet. Oh, wiring the heater, power tube heaters out of phase doesn't make any difference whatsoever. The phase relation of the heaters in power tubes doesn't really matter. In fact, if you wire them out of phase, you might undo some common mode cancellations. So if you must do it, keep them in phase. But it's really, I don't think you'd hear any difference. But it's best practice to wire them in phase with each other. Could I explain quickly about the cold clipper, and can it be done in an amplifier? Well, the general idea is that you want to make sure that you accentuate certain frequencies that can be really kind of harsh sounding to give a kind of a special a graininess or a character and a certain series of overtones. And if you do it by itself, it's way too much. But you do that in the context of a larger circuit where other things are biased more warmly, then it can add just the right amount of bite or definition to the attack. And it cannot be done to any amplifier because for it to sound good, or you need to have quite a few gain stages. And so you need at least 3 or 4 gain stages for it to be effective. Probably not as quickly as possible, but quickly enough for this channel. I think a lot of us would probably watch my videos at 1.5 speed. Chess is not still around, as far as I know, though I'm sure there's a museum. Sun is still around, and that is Elvis's old stopping ground. Elvis never did anything at Chess. The Stones did. But Elvis started out at Sun Studios, then went off to Nashville and RCA. Hey, buddy with an H, not saying I copied or anything, but have I noticed the similarities in the Tweedledee and what I've suggested as modifications to Princeton reverbs, particularly in regards to phase inverter? What's the best way to put this? I disagree with some of the stuff in the Tweedledee, with some of the local negative feedback stuff. I think it was, well, let me say, don't disagree with it. I find it very player specific, some of the changes that Dumble did in those, because I don't think Dumble did the same changes in every Tweed amp. I think he probably had like most of us, he had a various bag of tricks, and a certain person played a certain way. He would do this thing, and a different player would do this thing. But I don't do the local negative feedback thing on a Princeton. As far as decreasing the coupling cap value before the cathode follower, and adding series resistance to the grid of the cathode follower, Dumble did it. I do it. A lot of people do it because it's a known way to make a cathode phase inverter play more nicely. Hey, Alex, 2012. Yeah, Friedman's fantastic at customer service. He wakes up at like 6 in the morning and spends an hour and a half, 2 hours with emails, and I can't even form a sentence until the 3rd cup of coffee. I'm only on my 2nd cup today, so no guarantees I can speak to you guys. Yeah, radials was my inclination, but I don't know what all's out there on the market anymore as far as DIs. Hey, hey, Rob, Mojotone is a distributor for Haybors. So the ones on Mojotone's website are all Haybors. And they've got power and output for the most common Marshall models out there. And DI, Dustin here is also a better source to ask about DIs than I am. Sorry about that, forgetting you there, Dustin, earlier. Though if he's talking about Neves and Telefunken DIs, Dustin may be doing PAs at a higher level than most of us ever experience a PA, which would not surprise me given his knowledge. There's quite a lag in the chat. There's no lag between when I say something and you hear it. There's a lag between you asking a question and me getting to your question. Because I'm answering questions before. So we started off with me about 7 seconds behind real time, or saying it took 7 seconds for me to say something and you need to hear it out there in the world. But as I answer questions and other things come in, I get behind. It happens. Hey, Jeffs. I'm sorry. I'm always playing catch up on that. I'll look for that. Yeah, I'm swamped with emails. Aside from all the junk mails, I get too many emails for one person to keep up with, and I've had some other things happening lately. I'll look for that, Jeff. I apologize. Hey, Erwin, do I have any suggestions about alternatives to optocouplers using the SLO 100? No, I've never had to replace the optos in a SLO, and I've never built an SLO. I would suggest is it thermite amps? Yeah, reach out to thermite amps. Look for thermite amps. THERMITE amps. He's in Canada. His name's Alan. He's a friend of mine, a friend of Brad's. He's on here sometimes, and he knows as much about SLOs probably as anyone this side of Mike Saldana. And he will probably be the guy to ask about anything for an SLO 100. If I had an SLO come in and the optocoupler was bad, I wouldn't Google it. I just call Alan, but I won't give out his phone number here. But look for thermite amps. "2010 Blues Deluxe Reissue Recap, Rebuild, or Bonfire? What say I?" If it's not immolated itself, if it doesn't have severely burned traces around the low voltage supply, Zener diodes and resistors, recap it, rebuild it, replace all the stuff that gets hot, and play it for longer. You just stay on the clean channel. It's a good amp. If it's had too much damage, it was designed for the landfill. It's just fulfilling its destiny. But usually with a little bit of care and preventative maintenance, they can be saved from their intended fate. Yeah, trouble with those Vactrol clones, man, is most of them suck. I've had to get some of those for Mesas, and even though they say this is the direct replacement for this other thing, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, sometimes they half-ass work. Vactrols are a terrible, terrible thing. Elvis should have went to Muscle Shoals. Well, he did better than that, DB. He was at American Studios here with Reggie Young, which is another great studio that was here. I don't think the stream has stopped. Says my health is excellent. That's something must be talking about the stream, not me. American Studios is no longer there. Where American Studios stood, there's a Dollar General or Family Dollar store, but there is a historic plaque. I'll take you guys there for on a tour of places that used to was, I suspect. All right, we had a glitch, but we're back. It doesn't appear to be on my end. So everything here is showing strong. I'll have to look back at it. Sorry about that. Where were we? Muscle Shoals is also great. And a lot of great music was done in Muscle Shoals. All right, so some people are getting more buffering than others. From what I can see, is not on my end. I've never had any internet issues while doing this. I've had audio glitches, but we should not be prone to that. Let me, just for fun though, let me do a speed test thing. Just make sure there's nothing wrong with our setup. All right. I'm downloading at over 200 megabits per second. Let's test the upload now. Actually, I'm downloading at 707 megabits and I'm uploading at 200 megabits. So I think that's pretty healthy for this time of day on a Saturday. If there's a problem, I don't think it's on my end. You got a 62 Les Paul Jr. for $1,500. You won. Have I seen the Power Flex by Jess Oliver? Has a power lift system that lifts the amp mechanically. No, I've got these things, and I've not met an amp I can't pick up yet. Now, maybe as time goes on, but I think I've got another 20 years before I have to worry about that too much. Mr. Train was indeed cut at Sun. A lot of good stuff was cut at Sun. Let's see. All right, cool. We are caught up with where we're at, and which is great because we're at the top of the first hour, pretty much. Top of the bottom of the. I always forget my innings reference. I'm not even plugged in, and out of habit, I just went to roll down the volume because I was done playing for a bit. We're going to take our first of 2 7-minute intermissions. Some of you lucky so-and-sos will get a commercial. It's just how I pay the bills, but I don't stick the ads in the middle of the stream or in the middle of the important stuff, just during the intermissions when everyone's off taking a leak anyway. So see you guys back in 7 minutes. All the parrots here are pining. What did you do? Victor had a question. Well, how is the quality of Mojotone small parts kits? Pots, jacks, resistors, etc. Do I know? Well, I don't order kits. I assume you mean for guitars. I will say that I have had some clients who've brought in some pre-wired Mojotone harnesses and stuff, and they've all been done consistently very well for Mojotone. The soldering is quite good and neat. They use Switchcraft jacks. They use really good, especially the Mojotone branded pots or the vintage taper made for them by CTS. I'm sure the caps are just like orange drops or something, which are fine, but they use good stuff. But I've not ordered any kits myself. They don't kill off parrots here. There are no parrots here to kill. Sorry, you never get Monty Python references, Brad. You're too young. Which is your fault, right? Sing that song in a minor key. It's hilarious. I went major on them. It's hard to do that. Hard to do that. I'll do that. I'll practice that off stream. Thanks, Wes. What amps or amp do I like and trust over others? J.E. Armstrong. Do you mean vintage or current production? Vintage. The most reliable amps have been Fenders made between 63 and 69. Current production. The Vox Custom Series is really good for the price. Really, really good for the price. Friedman, Sir, Top Hat, Germino, Swart. These are really well done current production stuff. Some others. Dr. Z's are very, very reliable amps. The main issue that any good amp company is going to run into, Headfirst, Metropolis, good amps, is tubes. Tubes are always the Achilles heel. You can have a great amp, and current production tubes, it's just kind of, may last 6 weeks, may last 6 years, may last 60 years. There's no way of knowing. So even the best designed amps out there today, or a vintage example, you may have a JJ that loses vacuum, may have electroharmonic that wants electroharmonics that decides to eat its own plate. It happens. That's why we have fuses. YouTube removed that ridiculous heart in the right-hand bottom corner of the chat. Well, good. I like a heartless chat myself. I have not enjoyed the hearts and emojis and the ranking of commenters and all that, as if it's all a game and a contest. I hate all that nonsense. And if it's going away or gone, that's great. I do find it odd that they insist that I tell you each time I make a video whether or not I have any AI content, as if I must be disclosing any AI content to you, or else. But they are choosing to make things AI that creators never intended to be AI. So it's a problem. Carbon amps, see if you repair videos. Not worth it, not popular enough, or super reliable. Just got a T100 stereo amp and thinking of recapping in bias mode. You can do it if you want to. They're not very good amps. They were very cheaply built to begin with, and they don't really last that long. I think Brad repaired a Carvin last month. Is that right, Brad? But they're not traditionally very well built, long-lasting amps, deserving, whose retail prices or resale prices justify much in the way of repair. My problem with orange amps, as I've said, are the pots. Cheap pot metal, really, really long, brittle shafts, and they insist on using split shaft pots with set screw knobs, and that's just a recipe for predictable failure. And if the pot does snap, you've got to take everything out to change it. So there's a pretty big trade-off for the artificially low price of those oranges. But beyond that, they are well built and they sound good. I'm not a big fan of all the sounds they give, but That is subjective. I'm not the arbiter of what people should and should not like. What browser, out of curiosity, Wes? Everything's been updating and new versions of everything all the time. So, what is my opinion of the Fender Mike Landau Hot Rod DeVille, and would I recommend one to you? If not, what would I recommend instead? Hey, Bruno, thanks for joining us. The Landau is just the same as the regular Hot Rod DeVille, only they admitted that the drive channel sucks. And so you have two different clean channels. Instead of a clean channel and a drive channel, you've got two different clean options. Other than that, it is exactly the same amp with exactly the same issues of things burning and catching on fire. It is a not very good amp, and it gives you two variations on a clean channel. Unless you need the volume that it is possible to get with a Hot Rod DeVille, I would say the 65 Deluxe Reverb Reissue is a much better amp that gives you the same thing, much more reliably built, much better sounding. If you need the volume that the Hot Rod DeVille can offer, then I would look into a Super Reverb Reissue, the 65 Reissue, or spend more for various offerings from Sur and Top Hat and stuff. In terms of picking up something in the price range of the Hot Rod DeVille, I'd rather have a used Deluxe Reverb. It's a much better amp, and I recommend buying one used if possible, and not giving Fender too much new money, because they do other things to their customers, like the Hot Rod series and the Blue series, that I strongly disapprove of. But the 65 reissues are really good, and a lot of them out there used because they've been made now for approaching 40 years. Hey, Captain Grumpus. Looking to replace a speaker on my 76 Vibro Champ. Jupiter has their 8-inch ceramic offering on sale right now. Yeah, Jupiters are made, I believe, for them to their spec by a warehouse who I use all the time. I bet that would be fantastic. Just make sure that their 8-inch ceramic will fit in your Vibro Champ. Most ceramics fit in most Vibro Champs, especially at 8-inch. Some of the 70s Vibro Champs, you can't put an Alnico in, but I think it'd be fine, and the Jupiter's going to be a fine choice. Firefox, that's interesting. I'm using Firefox to monitor the chat. That's what I've got. The live chat in here, and I've got the thing where it tells me how many people are here. 117 people here today. That's very cool. And then I've got the stuff I'm replying to, which is not quite in real time here through this app, but who knows? I know that Firefox updated itself yesterday, so maybe it doesn't play well with something else on your system. Yeah, I agree. I find orange amp owners seem to be the most likely to cover their amp with stickers. Yep. And for some reason, Fender owners are the most likely to get drips of house paint on their amps. Do they not understand the concept of a tarp or moving the damn amp into a room where you're not painting? But yeah, oranges almost always come in with stickers. Hey, if your T100 is going, that's great. But in general, as an overview of that brand, I cannot recommend Carvin to people unless they're really, really wanting to nail that we built this city kind of sound. You have to be of a certain age to get that reference. The blue Ajax, the sausage caps that Fender used to use. Hey, Chengo, do they sound better than other caps? You hear folks wax on about them and others say there's no difference from other well-made caps. There is no real difference between them and other well-made polyester caps. They do sound really good, though. I don't think they sound better, but they sound really good and they're original to the amp, so I would not ever recommend changing them out unless one is actually failing and they very, very rarely fail. The only time I ever see them failing is in the output section of an AB 165 Baseman, because they use 400 volt caps in the phase inverter output. Other Fenders use 630 volt caps, but the Baseman uses the 20 or 22 nanofarad caps, which were only 400 volts. So that's where they develop issues. If they'd used a 600 volt cap there, like they do in the output of other Fenders, that would not have been a problem. So I don't think that they sound better, but they sound great. And as Brad says, yeah, in comparison to the yellow and red Astrons that came before them, they are the caps of the gods, because the red and yellow Astrons are the Fender used before were junk. And then after Fender stopped using the blue Ajax, they went to the big blue molded Mallories, and then to the reddish brown, people call them turd caps. And players associate those caps as not sounding very good or not being very reliable, because there were other changes starting in '69 that coincided with the change away from the blue molded Ajaxes. And people blame them on the caps, because to the player, you say, oh, yours has got that cap, this has got this other cap, yours sounds better, it must be these caps. It's not the caps. It's the wax on the board and the wire used and the sloppy lead dress. And then later in the 70s, some less than stellar design ideas that the CBS engineers had. But to the player, oh, it's the caps, the problem. The later caps also sound great, all other things being equal. And I really like the sound of the darker blue Mallory caps, and I like the sound of the red brown, the brick red kind of turd caps. But I can't convince the entire world, just you guys. I don't think Marshall had anything to do with the synergy stuff, but I don't know. I have not asked. I know two of the guys involved in synergy. I've never asked them much about that project, so it hasn't been something which has intrigued me, other than as a conceptually cool idea. The blue Sozos are fine, but they are physically way larger than the blue Ajaxes. The blue Sozos are just crazy large, and I don't use them. You pay an awful lot for blue. Jupiter's same way. Jupiter's even more overpriced, and I will use them if an owner wants them, because it's a purely cosmetic choice. And the Jupiters are fine caps. The Sozos are fine caps. The Jupiters aren't comically overlarge like the Sozos, or like the very recently priced Dijons that Mojotone sells. Great caps, physically just ginormous for the spec. I don't use them unless someone were to insist on it, because if you have two caps that are touching each other, it's not going to sound as good as two caps with an eighth of an inch of gap between them, which is not going to sound as good as two caps with a quarter-inch gap between them. So air is an important thing. Space between components. I do not have any experience, Travis, with quilter cubs. I wanted to say quilter club. Just got L happy. I don't have any experience with them. I've heard good things about them from players and bad things about them from techs, but that's all apocryphal. Sorry. Mallory 150s are fine. I don't like the look of them when you're trying to make something look pretty. They're kind of slapdash, but that's one surface level. The main thing about Mallory's I don't like, in comparison to the caps that I used, is that the leads are very thin and kind of wimpy, and it's hard to get really pretty lead dress with Mallory 150s. They sound fine. I have used more than my share. I just find that the Vishay MKT 1813s look prettier, and have a much thicker lead, which I'm able to get a better looking and, in my mind, more reliable installation with. Well, the Sozo owner is no longer the Sozo owner. Sozos are now being made by CDE Distribution, and at a different factory than Sozos used to be made at. And the factory that used to make the original Sozos for the guy that you're talking about is now making caps for Synergy, branded as Synergy by the same guys who are doing the Synergy module projects. So if you want that style of yellow cap, you can get the original Sozo sold as Synergy, or you can get the new Sozos. But the guy in question seems to be out of the loop now, Ted. What about polyester versus polypropylene versus polyethylene? What about polystyrene? You forgot one of them, Wes. Polyana. In general, most amps traditionally use polyester, at least Fender, Marshall, Vox, and so I usually use polyester. I use polypropylene sometimes. It has its adherents. I know Randall Aiken is a big fan of polypropylene, and he likes 1,000-volt polypropylene. There are people who like the hi-fi approach that, hey, this is going to not have any unusual distortion characteristics or changes in behavior depending on frequency or humidity or temperature. And there are those who like to say, well, this is what was used back in the day, and I like the way that it behaves, and any randomness or distortions generated are part of the vibe. And since I'm often restoring a vintage amp that had polyester, I will do that. Now, I'm not worried about using metallicized film versus a different kind of construction if the sound is good. I think too much is made of that. The polyethylene, I think you're talking about the PET stuff that WEMAs make. That's basically the same as polyester as far as in my experience. And the polystyrene stuff, I said almost jokingly, but those are those little bitty picofarad value caps, which can sound fantastic, but they are very prone to microphonics, and it's like soldering an angel's hair. Sometimes those leads are not very reliable. There's a reason that people who use those often have to put a big gob of silicone on there to make it usable. And I'm not sure in the real world that they have any benefit over, say, a Vishay 562R ceramic, which is my usual preference for a cap in that value. Hey, Daniel James, about to recap a 65 Princeton reissue soon. I've seen me using FNTs and MODs. Where am I seeing the better quality in the here and now? I like both MODs and FNTs. I've had very good results with both, and the MODs cost less, which is a nice thing to pass along to the owner, and it's significantly less, like 30% less. But I've not seen any correlation between that price difference and the quality so much as one cap is coming from Germany and one cap is coming from Asia. So two high quality, equivalent quality capacitors seemingly. In fact, the MODs are rated for 105 degrees, and most FNTs are 85 degrees. The place where you can get into things is that, okay, well, MOD doesn't really sell a 16 microfarad if you want to chase the exact capacitance of an old Fender, like your Deluxe or your Princeton Reverb. At the same time, the voltage rating of the the FNT 16 microfarad is 475 volts, whereas the MOD 20 microfarad is 500 volts. So you've got more headroom in case with modern wall voltages, the wall voltage were to ever exceed 475, even unloaded. And you're really not going to hear a difference between a 20 microfarad and a 16 microfarad cap, assuming that all caps labeled 16 microfarad are precisely 16 microfarads, or that all caps labeled 20 microfarad are exactly 20 microfarads. There's always a plus minus tolerance to all these caps. So this 16 might measure 18, this 20 might measure 18. And if you're in Europe, you also would want to add TAD caps to your list. Those are also very good. TAD caps being imported, I believe, from Germany as well, cost quite a bit more in the United States, as far as I can tell, than the MODs or even than the F&Ts. Whereas Brad in Australia gets a much better price on TADs than he does on F&Ts. And all of a sudden it's alphabet soup. So TAD, F&T, MOD, depending on where you live, whichever is the better price for you, as long as you are keeping an eye on the max voltage rating. On a reissue Princeton like yours, given modern wall voltages, I would be inclined to use the 500 volt 20 microfarad MODs instead of the 16 microfarad 475 volt rated F&Ts. You'd have a greater window for voltage variation. You'd save quite a bit of money, and you won't hear any difference. Or you might, any difference that you hear might be to the amp's benefit, since Fender originally spec'd out the 16 microfarads. Actually, they don't use 16 microfarads in the Princeton reissue, because the original was 20, 20, 20, 20, so 20 microfarad sections in the original, and the reissue uses 22, so you'd be sideways. So you'd be getting a much better cap than the what came in it from the factory on the reissue. Sorry, went all kinds of directions. I was thinking deluxe reverb when I was thinking 16 microfarads. Sorry, because I had read PRRI a long time ago, and on the screen it looked like DRRI. The white Mallory 150s are supposed to be the bee's knees, but I don't know if they exist anymore. They're the same as the yellow and the white. They just changed the color of the film for a while. And for an awful while, I mean, it was really awful. You'd order a bunch of different Mallories, and you get a whole bunch of white ones, a whole bunch of yellow ones, and you get, depending on where you got them from, you get them from different time periods, so that the labeling would be all different. None of them would visually match each other, you know. What are my stage 0 signs for tube amps? Sounds or something I may notice earlier than others? I think that there are, I know that there are players who would hear things before I do. I also know that I hear things earlier than most players. I'm trying to be accurate without being egocentric about this. I also know what are warning signs and what aren't, and I know what a healthy example of most amps are supposed to sound like. One of the most important things, and I can't demonstrate this right now because I don't have an amp plugged in, but I'll show you. A great way to check the overall health of the filtering in an amplifier. Now, this doesn't always work on some old AC30s and some old JTM45s that had really low filtering. But even with those, with enough experience, you know what it should sound like. But here's a thing you can do to see as an early warning sign about the filtering of your amplifier in general. So you take a guitar, you have to get it in really good tune, make sure it's in tune with itself. You play the low E string, and you play on the high E string the minor 10th, so you play the G. And then you play the major 10th, the G sharp. And if the amp's filtering is not good, one or both, or sometimes the overlap of the overtones from this that are still happening while you play this, the amp will kind of beat against itself. It'll sound out of tune, or like it's going flat, or like the note doesn't want to ring out. Another good one is this one here. It's a partial major chord. It's really the G form E here, but I'm doing the open E. And again, getting that 10th. I don't know why a 10th has more to it than a third. That doesn't teach you as much as this. So I don't know why, but it does. I think it's just maybe it's a wider frequency range that the amplifier is trying to reproduce. And there are other chords. You can hear anything involving a lot of thirds. So a major 7th chord. Wallpaper Music says that's not a 10th, add an octave. This is a third, means this is a 10th. Well, don't argue with me. I got the microphone, but here's a third. Here's a 10th. Well, we don't have 18ths or whatever it would be. And it doesn't do it if I play just that. Which is an interesting thing in that I can do. If I wanted, it's hard to do it on this. That's a pure 10th then. That does a little bit, but you use the lower octave instead of this one. And the amp really makes it apparent. So, well, what do you call it if it's over an octave over the 10th? What, I don't think we need to go into 18ths. But if I just call it a, should I just call it a third then? How do we differentiate between a 10th and a third? You know. This and this and 72 seconds. Yeah, 72-second bridge song. I think of it as a 10th, just because the octave, the interval is very wide. Chill out, Lyle. Has telling anyone to chill out, telling anyone to settle down, telling anyone to relax, telling anyone to not take it so seriously, ever been effective as a conversational gambit? Anyway, those are some things that anyone can try, whatever you want to call the math. That's an easy thing you can do with almost any guitar, but the guitar has to be in tune. Otherwise, you won't know what's from the amp and what's from the guitar. And on a related note, going back to a few streams, make sure you don't have any oscillating fans in the room at the time, because it'll make the string warble regardless of what the amp's doing. Hey, Hal. All is well in Midtown. These are the Fralins, and they came from Fralin with nickel covers. He makes a noiseless one with, but I didn't go for the noiseless ones. You're welcome to come check this one out, though. I think you've already played this one, Hal. But you're welcome to play it again. What you wonder about the mixer bypass? I like the ceramic much better than micas. But again, and I say this, I need to get a little. You know how they have those videos with that little black box at the top that people never remember which corner it's at, or they'll say, "Hey, I put it up here and here," and they forgot to add the link. I wish I could do that on a live stream. Is say, click here to watch the explanation, but avoid the if you must use silver micas, avoid the ones that just say SMD. Those are garbage. And for ceramics, I like the 562R series from Vishay. Dave Friedman likes them too, if that gives my suggestion any clout. Let's see. The more I listen to high gain amps, aside from Mesa, I feel they all chose a variation on the modded Marshall Superlead 2203S. Thoughts? Well, they're basically two typical high gain circuits. Those that are adding more gain to, and sometimes adding diode clipping to, or sometimes adding some other tricks to a Marshall 2203, 2204 circuit. The Jose mods, the Metaltronic stuff. That's route one. That the appetite sound. That's all variations on that. And the other one are those that are inspired by the the SLO, the original Soldano. Those are the two archetypes that most high gain amps do. Now, I think that Bogner has done some stuff that are not following those archetypes, and possibly Diesel. I'm not familiar with all their circuits, but I will tell you that almost every high gain amp that you run into are variations of this lead, the super lead or the SLO. Now, I notice that you include 5150s, Mesas, and SLOs in two different categories, whereas the 5150s and the SLO, actually the Mesa, let me restart the sentence. The Mesa dual rectifier, triple rectifier, single rectifier, and the PV and Fender 5150 variations are all variations of the super lead overdrive, the SLO circuit, the Soldano, whereas everything else pretty much, Friedman, BE100, so many stuff out there, so much of the high gain stuff out there is a variation on the 2203s. But the SLO is not a variation on the 2203, and other than it has cascaded gain stages and a general overall topology. But all those topologies derive from the 58 through 1960 5F6A basement. If you go back, and if you squint hard enough, an AC30 is the same thing. So it's interesting. There's only a few basic archetypes we use. Let me close these blinds because the sun there is coming through in a real hot spot. As a general rule of cinematography and photography, and just to soothe one's own ego, always try to be the brightest thing in any given room. Let's see. I gave SLO a lot of credit there, but I know you're talking to Sash. Yeah, that's fine. I use the 22 microfarad Vishays because I have a whole bunch of them because I just stock those. I know that I could use a much smaller amount of capacitance to do the trick. 10 or 8 would do it. 6 would do it. But I have the 22s, and it doesn't hurt a thing. So if I can keep if I only have to stock a large quantity of 1 or 2 parts, is much better for me than if I have to stock a large quantity of 30 parts. So. Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate that. Let's see. I wonder if the filter caps thing happens with the same notes in Europe. That's a good question. I don't know. You know, because I'm focusing on E as a key. So 60 hertz is right there fighting against the fifth of E. So if someone in Europe wants to get out the frequency chart, maybe you need to do it in E flat. Someone in Europe with 50, or someplace with 50 hertz, Brad, for instance, you got 50 hertz, right? You got 240 volt, 50 hertz supply. Would you find that out for us, Brad? Because you're qualified to tell us. Maybe that trick only works with 60 hertz supplies. So to all my US, Canadian, and Japanese friends, well, you're welcome. And the rest of you won't ever know unless you do it in E flat. Hal Hawkins, please don't come play. Make the rest of us look bad. How do you think I feel? I'm sitting in this room, and guys like Hal and Joe and Steve and Logan come over here, and young Christian, they come over here and pick up my damn guitar in my room and play through the same damn app that I've been playing through already, and just pants me in front of the entire world. And I'm totally cool with that because they're awesome, and I'm lucky to have these guys willing to come over here and do these videos for me, and by extension for you guys. So Hal, come make the rest of us look bad anytime you want. Did I not say SM? I meant to say S&M. I'll watch these back. I'm like, why did I say that? I'll misspeak, and in the moment I don't even hear it. I'm sorry, because I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping track of all these things. And so what I actually say, you know, elephant nuts. I spam wrench. Don't pay attention, ceramites. You know, just word salad at some points. See, Hal's a true friend. He's about to get a Peerless Casino with 1 and 11/16 nut. We'll bring it by with lunch. All right. See, Hal brings me euros. We have our guitar lunches sometimes, and we'll have to do a comparison of these casinos. And Joe Restivo was threatening to bring over his 61 ES330 and do a comparison with the casino with the Fralins. That'd be another fun video. Maybe the three of us will get together, and Hal will just have to bring another lunch. I think we all owe Joe a sandwich or two. I am really seriously lucky to live in Memphis and be around all these great players and have this great heritage here. It's both inspiring and depressing. I live 7 minutes from where all this happened, and you don't get talent by proximity, sadly. Hey, Sun Tzu, got a Warmouth build, ordered 41 millimeter nut width, did not own calipers at reception time, now own them. I see the nut measures 41.9 millimeters. Is this within spec? I don't know, because I don't think in terms of millimeters. But Brad will know the answer to your question. As Brad says, if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's why I have a very big room here, and I'm glad to have guys with all kinds of expertise here. Brad knows guitars a lot better than I do, and Brad speaks metric much more fluently than I do. So Brad, if you can handle this question for Sun Tzu, I don't know whether that's the next standard width up or what. My first answer is forget about what the calipers say. How does it feel? Do you like the feel of it? If you just got a build, if you like it, then 41.9 is magic for you. And if you don't like it, then it doesn't matter if it's within spec or not, you don't like it. So I miss some ceramite talk. Ceramites are good. I like the 562Rs better, but the ceramites are quite good. Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying your strawberry blonde, and it will sound a lot better without that damn tweeter. But SWRs, they are so much better than things by like Eden and things that cost a lot more at the time, but they're not great. The strawberry blonde and the working man's 12 stuff, it's actually pretty good for technology for the price point it's sold at. And they're usually repairable should something go wrong, but they're not as well built as, say, some of the solid stuff PVs from 10 years previously. Ultrasonic cleaner goody guitars. I've got one over there somewhere, like $35 on Amazon. Is sold as a jewelry cleaner, and it cleans most of the things I need to clean out. Brad's got one about, I always forget which way to go, about that long, about that deep. He can do entire circuit boards in, but it was a little bit more than $35. Hey, Mr. Jeff, good to see you here. Speaking of being fortunate to know some very, very great players, here's one of them. And Jeff, if you ever make it down to Memphis, I will make sure that Hal brings you lunch too. Though we have to get you the veggie option, as I recall. It's all right. The place we go's got some great veggie options. Is there a noticeable sound difference between an original Fender amp running at 117 volts and one modified to work on 120 volts? Yes and no. Let's put it this way. If you adjust the two amps so that they're biased the same, they will still sound differently because the one working on 120 volts will have a little bit more headroom. At the same time, the tubes will be heated a little bit more, so they'll be running a little bit warmer. There is a difference. I don't know whether I could predictably say and that's why you would always prefer the one running at 117, or that's why you would always prefer the one running at 114, or that's why you would always prefer the one running at 120. I would, however, say that there is a difference. On some circuits, it's more apparent than others. You're going to notice it much more on a deluxe reverb than you would on a twin because the preamp headroom change is greater with the deluxe reverb than it is with the twin. And that if I had your amp here with you playing it in the room and I were to magically have one button which changed all the things at once, so I could say, here's your amp running optimally at 114 volts. Here's your amp running optimally at 117. Here's your amp running optimally at 120. Of those three, you would have a preference that may not be your best friend's preference, that may not be anyone else's preference, but you would hear and prefer one of them. But then you have to say, how much do I prefer that? Because do I want to have to bring a brown box with me everywhere or a Variac with me everywhere? Or is it 120 volts? That sounds really good too, even if it's not my preferred, but then I can gig so much more easily. There are other factors. I can take your 1966 Deluxe Reverb that you prefer the sound at 114 volts and say, all right, well, let's try it 114 volts with a GZ34 like it came from the factory, or let's try it 120 volts with a 5U4 GB. The B plus is going to end up about the same. The heater's going to be different. But and there'd be a slightly different response from the two different forms of rectifiers. But you may sound, that's 99% of the way there, and I can just plug it straight into the wall. So you got to say, what is real? What is internet hype? And what is close enough for practicality? Have I ever played or worked on a Mosrite? I have played them. I don't much care for them. I have not worked on one myself. My experience with Mosrites is that the neck reminds me of like a, what was that weird brand from the 80s? Electra. Which reminds me of Electra. Maybe it's just the frets or the way the dots are tiny. I was a big fan of Kevin Kinney and Driving and Crying, and I got to know Kevin a little bit back in the 90s. And he sounded awesome on a Mosrite. I played his once, and I couldn't play the damn thing. How is using pedals to add gain stages different from the amps that have multiple gain stages? Welcome to the question that launched an industry. It's going to depend on the player. For some, there is no difference. For some, it's everything. And for some, it doesn't matter. If you gave Jeff Beck a solid-state amp and a rat pedal, he would sound better than the rest of us playing into anything. There is something to be said for a really great amp, which is designed to work as a whole in itself, in which case, and whether that for you is a Dumble, or that to you is a Soldano, or that to you is a 68 Plexi, or that to you is whatever, when the whole thing is working, you are having very short paths from this gain stage to the next. Everything is together, and everything's specifically designed to work with each other. That can be so nice. But you might be the only person who's enjoying that. And to anyone else on the outside, it may sound indistinguishable from using a basic Marshall with 3 overdrive pedals. Now, I think there's a lot to be said for if you are getting the sound and response that you dream of, you're going to play better because you're feeling better about it, and you're not, part of you is not listening to the sound going, man, I gotta get a different pedal next time. I gotta adjust the treble. I gotta do whatever. I gotta make a change. You're not analyzing the sound as you're playing. You're not hearing yourself and not critiquing the sound or analyzing it as a producer. You're just creating, and if the sound coming out, whether that's all built into the amp or the perfect magic string of pedals, if your only thought is fuck yeah, that's awesome, that's the goal. We all want to get from I wonder if I should try a different mid-range adjustment to fuck yeah. So anything that gets you from 0 to fuck yeah in 3 seconds, that's the gear for you. And however you get there, it doesn't matter. But there is an art to doing it all within the amp. So play a bunch of great amps, play a bunch of okay amps, play a whole bunch of pedals. Don't believe the hype. Some pedals are overpriced garbage. Some pedals are overpriced because, or are expensive because the guy can only make 30 a year, and they're fantastic. So, take everything with a grain of salt and go and play. You'll know what the right one is. And it's fine to use a cheap pedal, because all it takes is John Mayer to play a $30 pedal, and then it's a $300 pedal. So be your own John Mayer. Find the cheap shit that works for you, if that makes you happy. I said SME. Okay. I meant to say SM, but I got thrown off by the CME, whatever the good ones are called. Sorry. See you, Martin. I say that probably an hour after he left. Let's see. Under which circumstances will a 470 ohm grid resistor on an ultralinear burn? Is there something to watch out in the repair besides changing tubes and tube sockets? You mean the screen grid resistor? Under which circumstances? Usually, if there's a short in the tube, if the tube is having an issue itself and it draws too much current from the screen, which is more likely with EL34s than any other tube type. Though in my trash can right now, there's a pair of less than a year old electroharmonic 6v6s that did that same trick. And there's a 65 reissue deluxe reverb here, where one of the 2 screen grid resistors on the board was burned. You could tell it because one of them had like blue and whatever stripes on it. The other one, all the stripes had turned black. But I can't tell you specific circumstances, just if you got an ultralinear twin, change out the screen grids for some 3 to 5 watt 470 ohm metal oxides, metal films, or my preference is wire wounds, and don't think about it. Now, they can still fail. If they fail, you had a serious problem with a really bad tube. And, you know, at some point, it'll let you know that the fuses needs to be changed as well, which is why we have fuses. It depends on the tube type. 6V6s and 6L6s, you're fine using 470 ohms. EL84s, you should not use the 100 ohms that the Vox used to. You can use 1K to 2.2K. And EL34s should be treated with caution as well. I use 1K. Brad uses 2K or 2.2K. His way is going to be even safer than mine. Mine takes players a little less out of their comfort zone. But there's an argument for really seriously increasing the screen grid. It can add some nice compression. And sometimes I'll talk to an owner about increasing the screen grids to like 2.2K. It depends to a degree on what the amp is. You know, if it's a 74 Marshall, I want to keep as much original as possible. If it's a 1959 or 1987 reissue, I feel that it's not a real vintage amp. It's a homage, and I have a little leeway to redesign it in some places. Let's see. I've recently discovered the joy of having a low power amp drive the power tubes. For example, my FX5E3 tried with my PV Valve King 2x12 once on the clean channel with an attenuator, ended up in flames. Oh, well, are you saying that you're using a power amp to... I'm not sure if you're saying you're using a low wattage amp and you're turning it way up, or whether you're saying you used your 583 to drive your Valve King. Can you clarify for us? I'm not sure what you did. You never run the output of one amp into the input of another amp unless you have already learned enough about this to know how to do a slave setup safely. You don't want to have your goes outas going into your goes intas. But Valve King 2x12 should be fine. But why would you need an attenuator with a Valve King? It has a master volume, doesn't it? But if you're saying that your Valve King died running into an attenuator, unless it was a really terrible attenuator, and there's some out there, like a Marshall Power Soak, terrible thing, or the Schultz Power Break, don't use those. But if you're going into even a THD hot plate, which is a good thing, but it's 20 years old at this point, let alone the modern attenuators that are out there, it probably revealed a problem that already existed in the amp, and it was just accelerated by the fact that you had the amp turned up a whole bunch more than you normally would, so the amp would be running hotter than it normally would, but that amp was going to fail regardless. So I don't think the attenuator necessarily caused the problem in the PV, but it hastened a decline that was already in progress. I just said progress like I've been watching Canadians. Progress. Anyway, speaking of progress, I need to progress to the other room for a minute. So we're going to take another 7-minute intermission, and then we'll catch the final hour together. See you in a few. All righty, got a good question up. Not that the other questions aren't good, but I've got a particularly good one here. I saw from Omar Molina. Sorry to almost Oscar you, Omar. In your recent Marshall video, I commented on reducing the input normal channel cathode cap, the cathode bypass cap, from 250 to 25 microfarad for less flub. I think the original was actually 330 in that, but 250 is also a common value found in them. Both fully bypass guitar comfortably. Do I actually hear a difference? This is where it gets really interesting. And there's what we hear, and there's what happens in the amp that we don't necessarily directly hear. And they're both important, and they overlap, so it's hard to know where one stops and one starts. Let's say that the primary purpose of a fully bypassed cathode is to make sure that there's no hum from the heaters injected into the tube. For instance, V2B, actually usually V1A because the way the tube's laid out, but the second gain stage in a Marshall 2203, 2204 uses an unbypassed 10K resistor for the cathode. And that is a common source of hum from the heater supply into those amps. It depends to a degree on the tube type. You get an old RCA or Mullard, you may not have any. Most current production tubes, you may in fact have some. And so one of the reasons that we've always used cathode bypass caps is not only to get the gain that we want or to set a high pass frequency that's appealing to the player, but to make sure that that stage is more immune from any hum being injected from the heater supply. Now in Europe, the heater supply is going to be about 50 hertz, and in the United States, it's going to be about 60 hertz. So you'd want to have something which is going to be below that frequency. And given sub harmonics, you may say, well, I'm just going to say 30 hertz. 30 hertz is going to be enough for both 50 hertz and 60 hertz and the subharmonics that might generate. Similarly, if you're in standard tuning, the low E is what, 81, 82 hertz? An octave below that, because we do have subharmonics, sub-overtones, we'll say 40 hertz. So we have 40 hertz desirable for full range guitar, 30 hertz may be desirable for full range heater reduction. Well, the subharmonics are not going to be as prominent as the true fundamentals, whether it's the heater noise or the guitar. So we may say that, let's say 45 hertz, to be negative 3 dB down at 45 hertz is just like the ideal place to be. It means we're going to have full, no attenuation for our low E at 82 hertz, whatever it is. We're going to have almost no attenuation at 50 hertz, 60 hertz. So the heaters are going to be fully bypassed. And we're down roughly an octave below all those things for sub-frequency response, subharmonic response. Well, if that's good, why not just make the whole thing flat down to infinity? So, why not just bypass the whole thing? We can use a 350, 330, even 250 microfarad cap and go down to like 3 hertz, which is what Marshall did because they were copying what Fender did in the 58 Bassman. And Fender was operating at a time and designing at a time when there were relatively few different values of capacitors on the market that would do what he needed them to do. So he was using a 220 or whatever microfarad cap. That's probably what his suppliers had. That was a part that would do what he needed to do that was low voltage, that fit in the space. And when Marshall did it, they just copied that and they grabbed a 330 microfarad because that's what they could get versus the 250 or 220, whatever. The problem with doing that, and if you want to do a full bypass, totally full bypass, to take out both the cap and the resistor and just put an LED in there. Say I want a 1.8 voltage on the cathode. I'll use a red LED with a forward voltage drop of 1.8 volts. Never going to wear out. It's going to be perfect, full range, full frequency, blah, 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 move on. And you can put it on the front panel so as you play it lights up if you want. Side note over. The reason we don't usually want to have down to 3 hertz and why you will feel a difference between a 22 microfarad and a 220 microfarad, even though the difference may be 30 hertz versus 3 hertz. For those of you with calculators at the ready, I'm snowballing all these numbers. I did the real math when I did the Marshall. I don't remember what the actual numbers were, but it's something like that, 3 hertz to 30-something hertz. is because all we need for full range is that low E string, it's called 80 something hertz, 82 hertz, and then the octave below that, so we're getting the full picture. So say 40 hertz. That's also going to cover drop D. It'll cover drop C, really, because the next thing you have to remember is that all of that has to go through your output transformer. And output transformers are not flat from infinite lows to infinite highs. They've got a frequency response of their own, and you're not going to get much below 40 hertz out of an output transformer, or much above 10K out of an output transformer. And then you have a speaker, and most guitar speakers don't have much above 5 kilohertz in the highs. And if you notice that Celestion sells like a 75 hertz version and a 55 hertz version of most of their speakers, or certain of their speakers. Most guitar speakers are flat down to about 80 hertz, and some of them go down about 55, 60 hertz, below which they're not really putting many frequencies out. So anything below what the speaker can really reproduce is wasted. Why amplify something earlier in the amp that won't make it through the output transformer, let alone be present in the speakers? Now, there's a caveat to that, in that our ear can supply a missing fundamental based on hearing the overtones of that fundamental. Like, that's how a 4x10 bass cab works. You get a guy with a 5-string with that low B, and he's slapping away. That little 4x10 cab is not reproducing the actual fundamental of that low B in most cases and in most rooms. But our ear hears all the overtones that fundamental was producing in the amplifier and fills in the gap. So we're using almost our imagination when we're hearing things. So while the speaker can only put out down to 80 hertz, or maybe sometimes down to 60 or so, and the transformer is limited, we still want to have a lot of that subharmonic, the lower frequencies present in the signal, so that it sounds complete. It doesn't sound artificial to our ears, and it has harmonic complexity. But whenever we play guitar and our string and the strings and the skin make contact, all these are making all kinds of frequencies, from the very high-pitched stuff to just... And that stuff generates stuff well below our range of hearing. So it's not like we need to have everything from 20 hertz up or everything from 60 hertz up. We're generating frequencies just all the time that the pickups are sending into the amplifier, even if we don't hear them, and even if they're not going to come out of the speaker and we don't want them. But they are taking power. The amplifier is trying to amplify them, and it's using available power to amplify these things. So if you do that, and it's got a 30 hertz content, and that is not being shelved by your cathode bypass cap, and it's not being shelved by your coupling cap after that stage, then the first stage and maybe the second stage, you're trying to amplify that stuff that you don't even want, let alone going to hear through the speaker. And one of the things that you need to know, and it's just a fundamental that's true, is it takes more power to amplify a bass frequency to a certain audible dB point than it does to amplify a treble or upper mid-range frequency. Some of that is due to the nature of speakers and just the efficiency. Some of it's a matter of how we hear things, because we're more sensitive around 2K than we are around 200 hertz, let alone 20 hertz. But also, that's why if you have a 50-watt guitar amp on stage, your basses may need to have a 300-watt bass amp to have the same relative level to you on stage. It takes more power to amplify a low frequency. And so if you have low frequencies going into the amp, it's amplifying them, and it's wasting energy. It's wasting power trying to amplify things that it can't really amplify, that we can't hear in the final product. And it is also you ever play a beautiful, say a 13th chord through a clean amp, and then you play it through an overdriven amp, and that just sounds awful with a whole bunch of gain. But through a Princeton, that's a dream. Overtones and how they interact affect everything, and as the gain of the amp increases, what was once okay becomes a problem. It's the same thing I was talking about earlier. And so when you have all those low frequencies, what if one of them is a B flat and you're playing in B, something where the note should be a B? Or what if the notes that's trying to be amplified is in between one of the notes that we're playing? You get all these weird sournesses. So if you take all that out by saying we're only going to pass stuff above X frequency, you're still going to hear a full frequency response, but you're not going to hear the sludge beneath what you want to hear. You're not going to be wasting power, so it's going to be much more efficient to play the stuff you do want. And this is a very long-winded explanation of a whole bunch of factors that aren't talked about a lot. Remember that at the end of the day, all this stuff, from the pick you use, to the string you choose, to the pickups, to the pots, to the pedals, to the amplifier, to the tubes, are all designed to make the speaker move. At the end of the day, we're playing a speaker. And if there's a frequency that speaker cannot reproduce, we don't want it. We don't need it. Within reason. Now, there are overtones above and below the stuff that we hear, which color the things that we hear, because this can't be a full treatise on how sound works. There are literal long white papers from the Audio Engineering Society and all on all these details. But all this works together to move a speaker in a certain way, and that speaker is going to sound different based on what cab it's in, how many speakers are with it, what room it's in, where in the room it's in, if it's close to a corner, if it's close to a wall, if it's on carpet, if it's up on a chair, if it's on a plastic milk stool. There's so many variables. As an amp designer, we can only control so many of them. But one of the things we can do is say, for full frequency response, if this thing is negative 3D point at negative 35 hertz, at 35 hertz, that's pretty much ideal. If this thing is flat down at 3.5 hertz, that's not ideal, because it's going to be wasted energy and all this flub stuff. And then you get into the thing where, well, yeah, but I don't want full range frequency response. I want emphasis above X frequency, like a Marshall maybe is negative 3B point, maybe like 260 hertz. That doesn't mean it doesn't have any low end. It just means the low end is not as apparent as, here's the low end and here's the upper mids and here's the treble. This is the stuff that matters, but it's still got enough fundamental there to feel right. And that's when you play it. That's when you get into the art and the science. So sorry if this bored everyone, but this is the stuff that you don't hear a lot on the internet. At least I've not seen in a lot of channels. And I know that everyone who does amp design just like, oh yeah, obviously, but it's not discussed a lot. And also you have to remember that historically, amp designers were not designing someone to sound good into a cranked anything. They wanted everything to sound like a loud jazz recording, or as much as possible to what a guitar sounds like in the room, only louder. So very loud, very clean. Leo Fender would be horrified to know what we've done with 58 Deluxes. Les Paul hated the amps that had his name on them because you cannot get a clean sound. If you go back to 1959, you've got a Les Paul GA40 amp and a Les Paul Sunburst Les Paul under the Christmas tree. You don't know that you just got like $3 million worth of gear for Christmas. You just got a guitar. Les Paul would have hated using that because he couldn't have sounded like himself. There's no clean sound possible if you plug a 59 Les Paul into a 59 Les Paul amp. Too much overdrive. But that kid who got that guitar probably is a junior for the kid, but he probably did get a GA40 Les Paul amp at some point. You turn that up past 2, and all of a sudden, oh my God, what is this sound? That's not what the amp designers intended. That's not what anyone ever intended. It was for Trini Lopez to play in the jazz lounge at the Tropicana. That's what they were designing for. But they got it wrong, and hail, hail, rock and roll. I should end the stream right there, but I'll keep going because it's not about a perfect ending, is it? But that would have been a good one. And Omar, I added the information about the LED because I had seen your follow-up question. You won't hear a difference between once the stage is fully bypassed in frequency, you won't hear a difference. But if you were to feed, it gets complicated. But if you really play, you'll notice a difference in the response of the amp. It's the stuff that you won't see on a scope necessarily that matters in this case. But that's why I also mentioned the LED trick. If you want it fully bypassed easily, say, all right, well, according to my load lines, I want 1.8 volts here or 2.2 volts or whatever at the cathode, fully bypassed. That'll bias the tube. Find the LED that gives you that, and just replace the resistor and the cathode bypass with a suitable LED. You'll be fine, and the LED should never wear out. I remember when the Heartbreaker came out and all the ads were in all the guitar magazines. I wanted one so bad. I was nowhere close to being able to afford one at the time. I did save up and got a PV Classic 50. That was a really good amp for what I needed it to be. And it sounded fantastic and was much better built, it turns out, than the Heartbreaker. And weighed a hell of a lot less, too. I had the head. I had a PV Classic 50 head and a PV 5150 slant cab with the original Sheffields. Probably worth a ton today. That was a great sounding rig. I was so upset that I could only afford something with that ugly fake tweed covering, but I couldn't afford a 5150 or Heartbreaker. But I got the 5150 cab and the Classic 50 amp. And later I sold the 5150 cab, but I used that amp for like 5-6 years. It was a good sounding amp. Let's see. Hey, Brian H. I'm using what's this thing called? Ecamm Live, ECAMM. It's only for the Mac, and it's about $300 a year. But I can do all these scenes, so I can go back to my previous thing here, and come back to where I was, and take all the stuff on and off the screen. And the ad triggering I'm actually doing in the YouTube console. Because I don't want to have YouTube automatically insert ads, or I'd never be able to get anything done because it would stick an ad in here every 2 minutes. But I really like Ecamm. I had I can't remember the name of it, something before, the generic open source one that everyone uses. And it was just crashed like hell. It was really hard to use. And I tried the one built into the YouTube app, and it was really limiting. But this thing is fantastic. It only runs on the Mac, though, and it's not cheap. But I think it's paid for itself over time, and it really lets me. I can do all kinds of graphics. I could have stuff coming at you all the time, and I choose to use this kind of minimally. And I've only recently found that I need to sit here with the mic here, so there's room for your guys' questions here. The more I do this, the better I get. If you go back and look at the first live stream I did, I was sitting in a chair right there and had a step ladder right here. And my phone was on a little stand, this thing's all jumbled up. But a little stand holding right there. And I kind of had a light on me, and it was grainy and awful. And it sounded terrible. I think I was using a Rode mic on my hat or something. Whew. We get better at this stuff. There's nothing wrong with the little Rode lav mics. The one I had was one of the earlier ones, and it was not sounding that fantastic. Actually, no, I think had a lav. Not didn't even have the wireless. I just had a lav mic. Not a good one. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, almost every desk has got an 80 hertz button. Just dump everything below that, and a lot of EQ guys will shave off below that, especially for live stuff. Like that guitar does not need to be 100 hertz. That's where the bass and keyboards and kick drum live. So you're gonna shelve that. You may shelve a distorted guitar amp below 200 hertz or so. Dustin can tell you more about that than I can, because my knowledge of that is from doing it in the past and knowing all the theory. His knowledge is from doing it last night. So go to Dustin with those questions. But yeah. Hey, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I like that. I like that, knowing that for you it's a Saturday night stream. For me, it's a Saturday afternoon stream. And Brad and a few of those other crazy Australians, it's a Sunday morning stream. I like knowing that people are here from all over the world in various states of being awake. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Did Leo always use readily available components, or did he have to go get some components custom manufactured to meet his needs? Well, the caps and resistors and iron he got pre-made. Yeah, he went to the Schumacher catalog. Now, maybe later, as Fender went on, they were able to call Schumacher and say, hey, we need something that does this. But I'm pretty sure that everything he was using was off-the-shelf Schumacher parts. You know, he made his own chassis and bridges and stuff. They had a machine shop down the street that did all that kind of work. And later they built their own, they did a lot of the machining in the factory themselves. But, you know, Fullerton was a industrial kind of place at the time, and so he had the machine shop down the street that did this, and he had, you know, all the other places that did that. I know they made the cabinets there in the factory, but you know, there's not a lot that goes into Fender of the time that were all that bespoke. You know, the boards were material that was sold to be the linings of suitcases. So you could buy that stuff by the sheet pretty cheap. It's basically heavy-duty cardboard. They cut it or stamp it to the size they needed. And then the eyelets are brass eyelets that were sold in sewing stores. It was for putting an eyelet, you know, like you'd have on your tennis shoes to put the laces through. And then, you know, but they were brass, so they could be soldered to. Pastor says, I get harmonic feedback on an almost clean setting on my prototype single-ended amp. That's insane and fun. Yeah, I love clean feedback. It's just beautiful. And it's a wonderful thing when that happens. And that means that everything in the system is working together in just the right way. And the mutton's nice and lean. Oh man, Omar. You're loud Princeton behind a plexiglass shield. I don't miss playing out myself, because I go to see people who are capable of greatness, and they're just playing at such dinky little volumes. And I understand we don't need to be deafening anymore. I've certainly survived the days of everyone was louder than the PA. It was a nightmare in the opposite direction. But, you know, God, to hear a drummer playing the entire night, tap, 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 versus getting that rim shot, you know, there needs to be some volume. Things need to have some excitement. Oh, I'm glad you like the geeky stuff, because that's all I got. That's it. That and bad pop culture references, which is probably the other definition of geeky these days. So. I don't know that my knowledge is all that vast. I'm just long-winded, but I appreciate the thought, Martin. Thank you very much. Well, you may be onto something about the reverb recovery stage, because that's a different kind of thing. With you get into some, I think what the important thing to think about there is that the reverb recovery stage in a Fender is a shared cathode, and so the more capacitance you have there, the more immunity you have to bleed between the two, or immunity to any kind of local feedback between the two triodes. And so that's different than the pure function of a frequency bypass. You know what I mean? But I mean, in terms of how it sounds, is different than how it behaves. I'm not expressing myself well on that point. But if it suppresses behavior that is real but doesn't affect the core tonality, then that's in the behavioral camp. And then the core tonality in terms of, hey, does that sound like it has more or less low end? That's separate from its function of suppressing interaction of triodes. I think you understand what I mean, Omar. But yeah, you have a good point. And that's something that would be a place where an LED might be a benefit as well. For those of you curious about LED stuff, one more thing where Merlin's already been there. So right here, he's got a whole bunch of stuff about LEDs for cathodes, and he's absolutely right. And it works. And as I said, you can put them on the front panel and have all kinds of cool things light up as you play different things on the amp. But then you have longer leads from a tube to an LED than necessary. So yeah, use that kind of stuff in moderation. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. You're saving money for video lighting, etc. It's only uphill from here. Well, if you have any questions about video lighting, reach out to me. I bought all the stuff that doesn't work, and I've got the stuff that does. Brad just got some stuff that really works. Brad just got an Amaran from Aperture, and I've got two really good ones that are from Small Rig, and the lights are great, and the soft boxes are great, but the app sucks. So I wish I'd paid like 20, 30 bucks more per light and gotten the Aperture in retrospect, the Amaran. But remember, the $150 light needs a $80 softbox, needs a $100 stand. So it's only uphill from here. Man, if you do your own audio Q&A streams, Dustin, I'll be there. I'll have questions for you. Yeah, front of house is not always your friend, but I have found that it never hurts to sweet talk the front of house guy. Ask the bartender what their favorite beer is. Make sure they're well supplied. Get them on your side however you can, and you might sound better that night. Well, I mean, I don't know what quantities per year Fender was doing. I know that they would have had enough clout by 57 to call the Schumacher guys and say, hey, we need X, Y made, but it'd probably be variations of an existing model versus, hey, from the ground up, you needed to design us a Fender transformer. It's not always drinks, Richard, but you find that vice and you work it. I probably shouldn't say that, but that's how the world works. Some guys respond better to cash, Consider it a tip, a preemptive tip rather than a bribe. And yeah, on the other hand, there are fantastic front of house guys out there. The trouble is most of us aren't playing at places where the front of house guy is a front of house engineer. If you get a front of house engineer, that they're wanting to sound great because they want to get better at what they do, just as the way the rest of us want to get better at what we do. The trouble is most of us are playing at dives where the guy running the board is a friend of the bartender's brother-in-law or something, or the worse, the bartender's brother-in-law himself, or even worse, the bartender. And so it's not a front of house engineer so much as this guy who knows what the knobs do on this 1983 Yamaha board where only 4 channels still work, and don't touch that knob because it turns off the stage lights for some reason. You know, and good luck if the beer cooler comes on. Maybe I'm projecting from my own punk days. I know I don't look at it like it to you guys, but I was playing at the Antenna and the real punk alternative places. 350 hertz on acoustic high passes. Well, it only takes one time with squealing horrible feedback for you just to get sick of the whole thing. But yeah, I would find there are sound guys and there are front of house engineers, and we love the second category. But the first category can often be bribed to giving a slight bit of shit about what you sound like. So, what modifier do I have in my light? Is the room really deep? How close am I to the light? I'm getting a very nice ratio to the background. Just wondering. Thanks. Well, this room is not very big. Let's see. It's about 14 feet in this dimension, I think. Might be 12. I'm approximately 10 feet from that wall. I'm approximately 4 feet to that wall. So about 14 feet. The light is here, exactly one arm span away from one arm plus a fingertip. So whatever this is, that's where the light is to me. That's a large but not huge soft box, the dome style. And I don't have the grid on it. I just have it has two layers of diffusion built in. And I've got this in low power mode, so the fan doesn't come on, and I've got it at like 50%, which is equivalent of about 10% if we're in high power mode, where the light would be the same, but there'd be a fan noise in the high power mode. And then I've got around what do you call it? Parabolic. This is the parabolic. This is the lantern style up there, and that's a daylight one, and it is. I'm touching it now, and it is set to about 40% of its output, which gets the light around the room. I do have the option to turn on some other lights, like I can make that red curtain be red. I just didn't do it today. And the room is not big, but I am filming myself. I've got the lens right here. I'm touching the lens cap the lens hood right here, so it's not far from me. It's again arm's length, and that's it. I'm just a little bit over equivalent of 27 millimeters, probably about 28 millimeters right here. It's an 18 millimeter lens. Full frame equivalent would be 27. I think I'm like 19 or 20, so I'm about 28 to 30 millimeters on the focal length. I'm at f2.8. So I'm in focus, my ear's in focus, not only my nose and my eyes in focus, my ear's in focus at the same time, but all this is a little bit blurry, but not so blurry that it's going to be distracting. It makes the room feel bigger. And I'm also only at 30 millimeters, so there's very little compression. If I were to shoot this at 50 to, this one, I could do 50 to 75 millimeter on this, in which case I would look very close to this. I would look very close to the back wall. The room would shrink in, but I'd have to be 10 feet farther back. Otherwise, you just see my nose. So, sorry to go on that for anyone who doesn't care, but this is stuff I have spent a lot of time thinking about. So when I get asked about it, I'm like, oh, good. I get to talk about that. How do the G&L Z pickups work for anti-hum? I think they're just little humbuckers, aren't they? But I've not played with the G&L Z pickups because they're hideous. So I never picked up a guitar which had them in it because it's too ugly for me. Do I have a red or green mohawk or spiky dog collar hair? No, that's cartoon punk. Good. That's cartoon punk. I had long, curly, dark red hair, kind of like Michael Hutchins in the 80s. I had big hoop earrings and I had a beard, and I'm 6'2", and I'd like wear a dashiki and a leather jacket, and just didn't. I was the guy people crossed the street if they saw me coming because they didn't know what I was, and that made me happy. It was a long time ago. Actually, it was funny. Our first morning in London, I took Nikki down through Covent Garden, and we walked out onto Waterloo Bridge so I could show her, there's Parliament in Westminster, and down there is St. Paul's, and we're going to go there tomorrow. I'm going to go be there on Thursday and all this. And right on cue, across the street came an aging punk with the perfect sprayed, shellacked mohawk, and it was even in different colors. I'm like, and there's your authentic London punk mohawk. And it looks a lot better there than it does here. It's too hot here for a mohawk. First of all, this part we get all sunburned, and this part we just melt. So. We're actually at the end of the questions so far. Wow. Should we wrap up early today? Brad's going to be doing his own stream. I guess at 4 or whatever time it is in Australia when this ends, in 17 minutes from now. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. Randomly selected user has an inside-out mohawk. I am close myself sometimes. I've often considered about giving myself a faux hawk for the stream, but I don't know. It seems like I'd be trying too hard. Or maybe I'd do it just to show Brad what it's like to have hair again. A photo of me back in the day. I only have one or two. Man, I was thinking about this. There was a gap. Now everyone's got phones on their cell phones. Cameras on their cell phones, and so pictures of everyone are everywhere. And back before that, there were Polaroids and real cameras, and so there are pictures of me as a kid. There was a period where the only cameras were really crappy little digital ones that people seem to have, and I just have like a 10-year period of no real pictures of me. Do I have an ultrasonic cleaner? Yeah, I've got a like I said earlier, I guess you were asleep at the time. I got a small one, ideal for jewelry or eyeglasses, as the ad said, but it's good for the average stuff that I need to clean. But I was telling everyone that yours is larger and ultrasonicer. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap this up a little bit. Round out the hour for me. Okay. With friends like Brad, man. Thank you, Tim Sammons. Appreciate that, man. Very kind. So he wants me to go the full hour, so he's ready. Oh, those Australians and their TMI. So there was something I was going to say on the chat if I had enough time. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was got me riveting too, really fascinating stuff. It occurred to me this morning, I'm like, oh man, if I have time, I'll get around to that. And doesn't occur to me. Oh, I'm out of steam, and I'm out of questions, it looks like. So I think we're just going to I'm going to wrap it up, and Brad's going to be starting his stream in a little bit. So you guys have time to go get yourself a sandwich or stuff if you want to follow us over to Brad's channel. I'm going to type it here. You guys, I can't do a link right here. Maybe Brad or Wes could pop a link, but I'll give you the channel name. For those of you who don't know, look that up. He's got a live stream. He's going to start after this. What is an ultrasonic cleaner? It is a little... Let me find it, Cat. It is a little device that you put water and or some form of solvent in. And you can have little baskets go in here. I've got a basket that goes in here, and it's a little metal stainless tray. And you put the components in here, and you tell it to turn on, and it vibrates. It vibrates really, really fast, which generates heat, but it also moves all the little bits and bobs a lot, really, really fast. If you look at it, you can see it vibrating. It's just faster you can ever tap on something. And given a 15, 20 minutes in the liquid, a part gets much cleaner than you ever could by just holding it under running water or soap or scrubbing it, and it will do it without damaging most finishes or hurting anything. Now, it will remove paint from some knobs it won't, but I'll put a whole bunch of rusted hardware in here with just water and like 2 drops of soap, and put this on for maybe 20 minutes, and all the rust gets shaken off those things. And then what I'll do is I will take them all out of here, put them on a paper towel to get most of the water off. Then I'll have a little cup with some isopropyl in it, and I'll put each one in the isopropyl, which will displace the water, and I put that on a new paper towel. And so the water and soap remove most of the rust without damaging anything, get all the micro dirt out. And then the isopropyl displaces the water, and then it evaporates real fast, and I've got a really clean part without any real effort. It's great. And Brad's got a much bigger one that he uses to get like flux and shmoo off entire circuit boards. It has nothing to do with cleaning up ultrasonic frequencies. No. Thank you, Omar. Appreciate that. Hey, thank you very much. I'm sure it didn't need any game upping. Is that a term? But I appreciate the thought. Off topic, thinking of buying a new grill, Napoleon or Weber. I'm a Weber fan. I like the gold and silver series for gas, and I like the big old regular charcoal grills. But I don't know about Napoleon grills. For me, it would come down to Weber versus Big Green Egg if I were thinking of doing a non-gas. But I love Weber. They're consistently good quality. Not a charbroil fan here. I've got one out in the backyard. It's a piece of junk. $300 wasted. The trouble with the charbroil stuff, one of the many, and this is a big differentiator between like that and the Weber Silver Genesis, is that when you close the lid on a Weber Silver Genesis, it actually controls the amount of oxygen getting in, so you can keep it closed and not have any flare-ups. You close the lid on the charbroil, and oxygen just streams in from the sides and back, and everything can flame up anyway. The lid does nothing really, and the front gets hotter than anywhere else. It's just useless. So I'm probably going to get a Silver Genesis for us pretty soon after some other things are paid off for, and maybe later I'll get a Big Green Egg or something. But for right now, I've got an old kettle for charcoal, and I've got a terrible charbroil for gas that I can technically cook things on, but it's not enjoyable and it's not predictable. The Weber stuff is so much better. I should have spent $150 more and gotten the good one to begin with. So. Hey, Navid City. I often hear pick up an amp with master volume to hear an amp drive in low volumes. On the other hand, I hear most of the tone shifting comes from power tubes. Aren't these contradicting? Oof, no, your amp, you can hear, you can use an amp at low volume with a lot of overdrive coming in. And it sounds fine, but the louder the amp is, the more the output section is working, the better it'll sound. I missed it somehow. But I saw Brent here. It was just a minute ago talking about the bassman. I somehow missed popping on the stream, but he just did that 74 bassman, and he's got a great sounding master volume in there, and the amp sounds really cool at moderate and low volumes. He's keeping the master low, but it sounds better if you can turn it up higher. So. Hey, Jonathan Bear. Barrier. He's got a 65 dual showman on his bench. It appears to be untouched with a power transformer cloth wire 1 year code. I think it is a 61 or replacement 71. I don't know. I mean, it's possible that someone, there was a transformer in 61 that would have worked. I know that there definitely were many in 71 that would have worked with the dual showman. I don't know if there wasn't a transformer in 61 that would work with a 65 dual showman. Now, I've seen amps from the 60s that have plastic covered wire on the transformers, and I've seen amps from the transformers from the 70s that had cloth covered wire. So I don't know. I imagine it's most likely a 71. I don't know. I can't think of any amps made in 1961 that would have justified a transformer as large as the dual showman would use. But I could be wrong because I do not know everything. All right, I'm going to wrap this up for this week. Always good to end on a good old honest I don't know. There's so much I don't know, but I think that's the only way to be. I hope that you guys know more than I do, which can't be that hard. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next time.